Hi, Bob from Pinegrow here with the third video in our series on converting an HTML template into a WordPress theme. In this tutorial, I'm going to be creating another block, this time a nested block, as well as adding some specialized class toggles. Let's get started. So if you remember in the last video when we left off, we had converted our top hero block over top hero section over to a full block that was editable, including being able to edit the background color. And remember, the way we did that is we used a block attribute to change the class, and we were replacing the bg-primary class. And at the time, we were kind of running short of time, and so I selected to use an input field, which means that the end user has to know the Bootstrap classes and has to type that Bootstrap class in. And I was saying, well, there might be a better way, and I'll look into it before the next video. And so since then, I've come up with a better way to do this. Let me just change over to Pinegrow here. So here's our Pinegrow with the top hero section selected, and we had this block attribute where we're changing the class of BG primary using an input field. So instead of an input field here, a better choice would be to use a select field. And a select field just gives the end user a drop-down menu from which they can pick values. There's two ways that you can enter the values. So if you just hover here and get this help, we can see at the top, you can add in just the values. In this case, it would be, for example, BG-primary, BG-secondary, etc. Or we can add them as named values. And with named values, you enter what you want displayed to the end user on the left. So in this example, red, and then an equal sign, and then what you want to add for either single or multiple classes on the right. And if you have multiple classes, you just separate them with spaces. So you can see the top one is going to add a class of text-red. The next one down would add two classes, text-green and text.xl. So what I've done is I went ahead and put together a list of Bootstrap classes that are kind of relevant here for the background. So let's just switch over my code editor. I'm just going to go ahead and copy that, pop back into Pinegrow, and go ahead and paste that into the values box. We're going to save that and go ahead and export our theme. And then let's check out what that looks like over in our WordPress theme. So remember before, we could just type it in this case, danger. Now if we reset this, we should be okay here. So now we can just pick secondary or primary and choose whatever color class that we want. And it's presented as a very clean dropdown to the end user. Okay, so let's jump into creating another block. So we're going back into Pinegrow. And so the next block down that we're going to add is this logos block. And we're going to make this a nested block. So a nested block is useful whenever you have a block that has repeated content within it. So you can see that here within this bigger logos block, there's 6 individual logos. So we're going to make those interior logos a block of their own, and then basically define that or restrict this larger logos block from containing anything but these smaller logos blocks. Let me show you how that works. So we're going to go ahead and select that section. So the next section down is the one that contains all of our logos. And we're going to go ahead and add the block action to that, WordPress action to that. And we're going to say, again, I'm going to prefix mine, PGC logos. Give it a title. We could add a description. We're going to skip it. And then we're going to want to add some type of icon. I'm going to, rather than search for an SVG icon or something like that, even though the dash icons are kind of limited, they're just quicker for the purposes of these tutorials. So admin, just one that I happen to know. And then we need to assign this block to a category. Again, it's going to be a custom category. And that custom category is going to be our PGC-theme-blocks that we registered before. So since we've registered it before, there's no need to register it again. All right, so that's that. So we're going to go ahead and save. Go ahead and export, jump back over into WordPress, reload. Okay, now with that reloaded, just go ahead and click on here. A lot of times when you click on this box, you're going to see your most recently added blocks. So it's pretty easy to pick those out. Again, if you need to, though, you can toggle the block inserter over here, scroll down to the bottom, and you can see our PGC theme blocks, and we have 2 of them so far. Okay, so we have our block in, but you can see right now it's not editable. We haven't added anything in yet. So let's jump back over to Pinegrow and make it editable. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to define out basically each of these individual logos as a block themselves. And so where we're going to add that block action is on the column that contains the image, which is the logo. So this column is going to keep all of our logos put into neat discrete columns. And then we're going to want to make this image editable inside. So select that, and we're going to say block. So in this case, so I'm going to prefix again, PGC dash logo, singular rather than logos. Logo, skip the description. Again, another dash icon that I happen to know, heart, and custom in our already defined category or registered category. So you can see that basically when you're converting through your entire theme here, your entire HTML template, it's a little repetitive. But I do want to emphasize that if you look at the cost savings, the time savings that Pinegrow is giving you, so this is without doing any block attributes. This is the kind of code that is being created in the back end by Pinegrow, and the kind of code that you would have to create if you were making these blocks on your own without Pinegrow. So there's a considerable time savings here. Okay, so now we have that logo added in as a block. Let's go ahead and do a little bit more before we switch over into our WordPress. Let's go ahead and make this editable within the block. So we highlight that image. We're going to add block attribute ID. Let's just say logo image. Uses image for the size. I think we're going to want to use something like a thumbnail. And for a title, logo image. We can leave this as auto or select image down here for control type. Okay, so that should be good. So one of the powers of nested blocks is that right now we have this set up so that there are a total of 6 of them. So our end user might have either more logos, say they have 10 different sponsors and they want to list all the logos, or they might have considerably less. They might only have 2 or 3. So we want them to be able to determine how many of these individual logo blocks are within the larger logos block. And the way we can do that is by identifying where we want the logos added to or removed from, and then go ahead and limit what blocks can be put inside. So in this case, all of our logos are displayed in this row. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 logos within this row. So we're going to identify that row for adding the block inner content attribute. So this action is going to limit what allowed block types can go within this row. And so one thing that you do need to keep in mind is that inside of an outer block, you can only have one block inner content. So basically, I couldn't do a block inner content on here saying I could add more of these rows and then a block inner content here. You can only have one block inner content per master block or per parental block. So we're going to say block inner content, and then here we're going to say PGC-logo. So that's going to be basically only allowing for this block, this unique ID, to be added within this row. We probably don't have to change it, but we're going to change it to horizontal. Okay. So the final thing that I'm going to do before we switch back over into WordPress is right now, when we export this, we're exporting all 6 of these logos, and that's probably not necessary. And instead, we can have some kind of placeholder. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to collapse these down and select all of these columns. And then I'm going to add one of our other WordPress, not a block action, but one of our other WordPress actions onto here. And I'll just do a search for it, export. And the one that I'm going to use actually is item placeholder. So what this is going to do is it's just going to hold an area within our final theme, our exported theme for the logos. It's going to start with 6. But because we've identified them as blocks, we can add and subtract them within the larger logos block. So I'm just going to add that action. There's nothing that we need to put in for that. Okay, let's go ahead and save that and export it. And let's see if everything is turning out okay. So we're going to go back over here. I'm going to go ahead and remove this just in case. Sometimes when you leave blocks in and you make significant changes to them, reloading in over on top of them can cause some problems. Save this and then go ahead and reload. Okay, so now again here, I'm going to go ahead and add in the logos, which is the master holder for all of them. And one thing that you can see is that now when I hover over there, there's this plus here. That's going to allow us to directly add a logo in. Since the only thing that's allowed within this larger block are the individual logos, it's not going to ask us what type of block we want to add. Like, do we want to add a paragraph? Do we want to add an image? Okay, so those are in there. Now, if we look here, we can see that with this particular logo selected, we can now select an image. And we can pull it in from our media library or upload a file. So one thing that I should say is that right now, the way we have this set up, this is only set up to bring in things from the media library. And one difficulty or one caveat to that is by default, WordPress blocks bringing in SVGs. And that's because if you bring in an unknown SVG off of the web, somebody can actually embed code within that SVG that's malicious. So you have to be really careful when you bring in foreign SVGs into your media library, into your WordPress. The thing you have to balance is whether or not you trust your end user to properly vet those SVGs. And if you think that they can, you can turn on and allow for editing of SVGs here in the editor. So let's take a quick look at that. So let's switch back to Pinegrow. And if we go, I believe, into the page settings, no, must be in the theme and plugin settings. If we go into the theme and plugin settings, here we go. Allow using inline SVG images in block attributes. So if you go ahead and check this, save the settings, we're going to save here and re-export. Now, if we go back over into here, do a reload, and now select one of these images. Remember, they're brought in as from our agency template as SVG. You can see up here now that we see the image, whereas before it just said add image. We can replace it with an image from our media library. And remember, we're not going to be able to easily bring SVG in there, but now we have a new button, Edit SVG. Clicking on this brings up this code box. In here, if we wanted to, we can make tweaks. This isn't the best place to do this, but what we can also do is we can basically create an SVG in some outside program, some Adobe Suite or Figma or something like that, and then copy that SVG code into this box and replace out this logo. So that's actually pretty darn handy. And again, if you trust your end user, this is a great option. Okay, so right now, our logos block does not match our hero block, and that's because the color is wrong. So let's make it so that the end user can change that color. So again, I'm going to go to this block, and we're going to add, get rid of this, a block attribute, and then goes background color, I guess. We're going to again use this class because if you look over here in the tree, you can see the color comes from this BG-primary. Let's go ahead and select to replace that. This background color. Control type this time is going to be a select again. And let's go ahead and quickly copy off that list. So in this case, yeah, I guess these would be the same sort of list. If they were text, we'd want to maybe add a couple, but since they're backgrounds, go ahead and paste that in there. Save this. Go ahead and do an export, jump into WordPress. Again, I'm going to go ahead and delete this out just because I worry that sometimes importing can cause some problems. Save that, reload, bring that logos block in again, and let's see if we can change the color. And no, we can't. Okay, so we had a little bit of a glitch when we went over into WordPress. We weren't able to get those colors to change, so I had to drop out. And now I'm back. I did a little bit of investigating. So the problem is basically I used the wrong WordPress action to block that export. So this item placeholder generates some dynamic PHP, and that interferes with what we were trying to do with the change of the block attribute. So instead of item placeholder, which I guess makes sense, should only be used inside of a loop, we're going to just remove that. And instead, we're going to put on the standard don't export. So now that should free up the PHP code problem that we were having. So let's find out. Save that. Go ahead and export our theme. Jump back over into WordPress. Go ahead and reload. And then now in our logos, we should be able to change the background color. Okay, so now the background color can be changed to match that of the hero block. All right, so the other thing that I think that would be good is if our users could change the actual logo color. So right now they can add or remove logos, individual logo images from the logos block. They can change the background, but it'd be nice if they could change the logo color itself. So let's jump over to Pinegrow and do that. So for this one, I think we're going to do it a little bit differently. So we're going to go to the main block. And then I think, actually, we want to probably change each individual block color. So I changed my mind. Instead, we're going to go to this block, the logo block. And instead of putting a selector in like we did for the background, we can see that this logo color is actually changed. If we just jump over into our properties, this logo color up here, I guess, is actually changed by this text-white class in Bootstrap. So it's going to be different in Tailwind or if you're in your own system. But you can see that text-white class is setting a text color, and the logos derive their color from the text color. So I think what we can do is just go ahead, jump down to the logo block. And this time, instead of using that selector like we did before, we're going to use a different trick. We're going to go to more options here. So within these blocks, within the native WordPress blocks, there are a number of different control panels that are built in that you can turn on. And you get to those through this supports. So we're going to turn on this one, text color. And what that's going to do is it's going to add in the native text color selector from WordPress onto our logos block. So let's go ahead and save that and let's see if it worked. Export, jump over, reload. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and select this first logo. And now we can see that up here, there's a new menu. In addition to the logo image, we now have a menu that says color. If we drop that down, we can select a different color and change that logo to anything we want. And similarly, we can change this one. We can have this one be warning. So actually, let me back up. We can make this one yellow. So the colors that are going to be in this built-in selection box come from a different set of settings than your Bootstrap colors would come from. So that's just something to keep in mind, that these colors are not going to match, even though they look pretty close to like the secondary color, the primary color, such like that. They're actually different. Okay, so now we've got it so that the end user can fully customize that block. Let's go ahead and make one more block. So I'm just going to save this, drop back over into Pinegrow, and move down and let's make this divider into a block. So let's get rid of this. All right, so we're going to do this just like we did all the rest by making this into a block. So for this, basically, it's just a wrapper around that SVG path. So on this, we're going to select this one. We're going to select block, and we're going to go ahead and just turn it into a block. Okay, sorry if this video is jumping around just a little bit, but I'm having problems with my audio. You can see that I now have earphones in, so I can hopefully catch my audio going bad. But as I was saying, we're just converting this over into a standard block. So I'm just going to jump up here and do the normal. So I'm going to prefix it, PGC. And hopefully we're going to have more than one divider in our theme. So I'm going to name it divider 1. Running out of icons that I know the names of. And again, we're going to put it into a custom category, and you only have to define that once. And we have it right here, the PGC theme blocks. Okay, so that right there is enough to get our logo, or excuse me, our divider selectable as a block by the end user. We're also going to want to be able to match the color of that divider up to our other blocks on the screen. We're going to do that with a standard select, just like we did before. So we're going to go to block attributes. In this case, just going to, give it a attributed divider color, and we're going to want to change a class. Now, in this case, this is an SVG, so just like the logo images were controlled by the class that set the text color, in their case on the parent, if we change the class, the Bootstrap class that changes the text color here will also change the color of the divider. So we're going to want to target that text-primary class. Again, in Tailwind, you're going to target something else, or if you're rolling your own CSS, you're going to target a different class potentially. And then divider color, open up the attributes, and we want here a select. Okay, for that select, just like before, we're going to want to give the end user a whole bunch of different Bootstrap values. In this case, previously we were doing it on the background color, but like the logos, the text or the color of the SVG is altered by this text-primary. I've also brought in the list of different values into Pinegrow to show you how you can use the built-in Monaco text or code editor to change this. So again, before it was background, now we want it to be text. So I'm just going to highlight that and go ahead and hit the hotkey for find. Then open that box up, and it allows me to replace all of the instances of that BG. So you can do that right within Pinegrow without having to go to a different code editor. Now we can go ahead, copy all of that, and paste it into our values. Now, if we were to save and export this, our user could both add in the divider block and also change the color. So we'll just export that, jump over into WordPress, reload. Oops, it's actually left over from before. And okay, so now we can see that we can change the color to match the rest of the blocks. And here it is. Sorry about that. Right, so we can change the color to match the other existing blocks. Okay, so I want to do one last thing. I want to give the end user the ability to further customize their theme. And I also want to show you another controller called Toggle and some custom class work. So we're going to make it so that the user can flip their SVG. And so let me show you how to do that. We're just going to go back over into Pinegrow. And now to do this, we're going to actually have to add our own classes. So we're going to select that SVG. We're going to go up into the Properties panel and add a new class. Flip X. Go ahead and add that.
And then we're going to go over into the style panel and create a new rule. So we're going to click on the ellipse, click on the new FlipX class. Now notice that's going to add a new rule into style.css. So this is important to keep in mind. I guess this is a little bit arbitrary. In a better example, I should have probably created a new sheet called divider.css, but this should work. Okay, so now we have this new rule created, and we're just going to jump down to the transform sections, add a transform scale, and then an X of -1.
And you can see that immediately flipped that divider to the other orientation. Okay, so now we can go back into our WordPress actions and add another attribute. Flip divider. Again, we're going to use as a class. I'm going to try and show you how to use some of these others later in future tutorials. Replace the class of FlipX and flip the divider. Under attribute options, we're going to use a control type of toggle. And so that's to give the user a binary choice, yes or no. And if they flip the toggle on, it will add whatever value that we put into the value box in as a class, since we've designated use as class here. So right now, as it stands, one problem that we have is that the FlipX class is on the divider right now. And if we were to export over to WordPress, that FlipX would already be there, whether or not the toggle is turned on or not. And normally what we can do is add a WordPress action. If we just search of remove classes, and that would remove a specific class when we export over to our WordPress theme just for this purpose. The problem is that code interferes with the native block code. And so if it was on an internal element, we'd be okay. But because it's on the main block, defining block element, we can't use that WordPress action. And instead, what we're going to have to do is manually remove the FlipX class. So we had it on there so that we can create the CSS rule, but now we have to remove it before we export it. So as it turns out, right now, if we were to save and export and go over into WordPress, this still wouldn't work. And that's because of where our CSS rule was saved to, that style.css. So remember that for the rest of the blocks, we had to go up to our WordPress theme and plugin settings and bring the bootstrap.min.css and blocks.css style sheets into the backend so that we saw that styling in the editor. So that's where if you have multiple blocks that are going to be using a set of style sheets, this is where you want to put it. In this case, basically it's only the one rule for the divider, and we don't want to bother bringing that style sheet in if the user isn't using that divider. Now, this is a little bit of an artificial example because, I mean, it's only one rule, so it's not that big a deal. But if you had a bigger set of stylings, you probably wouldn't want to bring those in all the time. And so instead, what we can do is we can bring them in here to this editor style box. And we do that the same way we did in the settings. Click on the folder. That'll bring up a navigation window. We want to go to our original Pinegrow project, not to our exported WordPress theme, and select the style sheet we want to bring in. So now that'll load it into the editor and bring our custom rule in. If we needed to, this style.css is already linked in the index.html, the main template, so we don't have to bring it in, but we could bring it in here. And again, it would only bring that styling in if the end user was actually using the divider block. Okay, so that should be everything. So let's go ahead and save that. Export over to WordPress. Go back into WordPress. Reload that. Okay, so now we have our divider there. We can change our color and we can flip it. All right, so that is it. I think, based on what I'm hearing in my earphones, that we made that through that audio okay. So in the next tutorial, I'm going to bring in a couple of other blocks, maybe show a couple of other controls for our block properties, and also probably show you dynamic blocks. So far, we've just been using WordPress native blocks that are a little bit more limiting or have limits on what you can do with them. And then after that, I want to export a couple of more pages from the agency HTML template over into our WordPress theme. The page that we made so far is great for like a landing page, but not great for something like a post archives page where you're showing a bunch of your different posts. And so we'll look at exporting a couple more pages. If you have any questions, please feel free to jump over into our forums. A little bit easier for discussion there than on YouTube. But we do monitor the YouTube comments, so you can also leave a comment here. And until the next time, have fun designing with Pinegrow.